Welcome back, everybody. It's great to be back with you all again
Yeah.
to dive into a new topic.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, we're going to be tackling something that I know you've all been thinking about a lot because you've sent in articles, personal reflections,
Hmm.
even a few therapist recommendations. It's like you've
Yeah.
created your own self-esteem toolkit.
That's a good way to put it. And what's interesting is that self-esteem is one of those things that people talk about a lot, but it can often be
Yeah,
kind of vague. So it seems like you're all looking to go a little bit deeper
definitely.
than just surface level motivational quotes.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive
Mm-hmm.
is to help you all figure out
Okay.
what self-esteem is,
Mm-hmm.
how it shapes our lives,
Yeah.
and most importantly, equip you with some practical strategies
Yes.
to actually boost your own self-esteem.
Yeah.
We're not just going to skim the surface here.
Yep.
We're going to unpack insights from experts,
Mm-hmm.
see how this plays out in real people's lives, and maybe even bust a few myths along the way.
I think what's important for listeners to understand from the get-go is that self-esteem is not just this fluffy, feel-good concept, right?
Yeah.
It actually has a real, tangible impact on our mental health,
Yeah.
our relationships,
Yeah.
even our ability to achieve our goals.
Okay, so before we get into all that, let's start with some basics.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about when we say self-esteem?
Right.
One of the sources you sent in, the NHS, puts it pretty simply.
Mm.
It's the opinion we have of ourselves.
Okay.
It sounds pretty straightforward.
It does sound straightforward, but
Yeah.
it can be a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, and the NHS actually goes on to say that this opinion,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just some passive thought floating around in our heads.
Right.
It actually influences
Yeah.
how we feel and act on a daily basis.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not just about thinking good thoughts about yourself. It's actually about how those thoughts translate into our actions and behavior in the real world.
Exactly. And this is where I think things get really interesting.
Okay.
One of the articles you sent in from Better Up
Mm-hmm.
features a researcher named Kristen Neff,
Okay.
who has become a leading voice in the field of self-compassion.
Okay.
And she argues that the way we traditionally think about self-esteem, this idea that we should be constantly striving for high self-esteem,
Yeah.
can actually backfire.
So it's like this never-ending treadmill, right?
Yeah.
You're always trying to prove that you're good enough or worthy enough.
Yeah, exactly.
I can definitely see how that would be exhausting.
It is exhausting. And what Neff points out is that this constant pursuit of high self-esteem often turns into this judgment-based
Oh, yeah.
comparison game. We're always measuring ourselves against other people,
Yeah,
which then leads to this feeling of instability, like our self-worth is constantly on the line.
totally. I mean, think about all the pressure that we feel from social media these days.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's like everyone is presenting this curated, perfect version of themselves online.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine how anyone's self-esteem could survive that.
Right. And it really underscores Neff's argument that if our self-esteem is built on this foundation of constantly comparing ourselves to other people, especially these idealized online personas, it's going to be really shaky at best.
Yeah.
And potentially really harmful.
So if this chase for high self-esteem is a trap,
Mm-hmm.
what's the alternative?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do we just give up
No, not at all.
and resign ourselves to feeling bad about ourselves?
No, but it does mean that we might need to rethink what we're aiming for.
Okay.
Right. So instead of this constant striving for high self-esteem,
Yeah.
Neff suggests focusing on self-compassion instead. It's a much gentler, more sustainable approach. We'll definitely dive into that a bit more later on. But
Yeah, that sounds promising.
yeah.
But before we get too deep into solutions,
Okay.
I think it's important to really understand the impact of low self-esteem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, you sent in some sources that really paint a pretty stark picture of this.
Yeah, they do. And the NHS in particular is
Yeah.
very clear about the link
Mm-hmm.
between low self-esteem and a whole range of mental health challenges.
Okay.
They actually state that low self-esteem can be a contributing factor to conditions like depression and anxiety.
Wow, that's serious. So it's not just about feeling a bit down on yourself.
Right.
It can actually have a real tangible impact on your mental well-being.
And it's not just about our internal world either, right?
Right.
Low self-esteem can manifest in all sorts of behaviors, avoiding challenges,
Yeah.
engaging in a lot of negative self-talk, even turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
It's like this lack of self-worth starts to seep into every aspect of our lives.
You included an article from WikiHow that lists some of the behavioral signs of low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, Some of them are really relatable,
Yeah.
like difficulty making decisions, constantly seeking reassurance from others, or even just, hiding from social situations.
Right.
Like those are things that I think a lot of people struggle with,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
whether they realize it or not.
And it highlights the fact that low self-esteem isn't always this really dramatic,
Right.
obvious thing, you know? It
Yeah.
can show up in these subtle ways that we might not even recognize at first.
Yeah, totally. One of the sources you sent in, the Psychology Tools article, shares this really powerful story about a woman named Rosie
Okay.
who struggled with constantly overworking and being terrified of criticism.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out that her low self-esteem stems from these childhood experiences where she felt constantly compared to her siblings and never quite good enough.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, so Rosie's story is a powerful example of how these early experiences can leave a lasting impact
Right. Yeah.
on our self-perception. It's like we internalize these messages of not being good enough, and then we carry them with us into adulthood.
It makes sense, but it is hard to hear. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking, but I think it can also be really validating for anyone who's struggling with similar feelings.
Totally.
Like, it helps to know you're not alone in this.
Exactly. And you know what's encouraging is that even though these early experiences can have a profound impact,
Yeah.
they don't have to define us.
Yeah.
There are absolutely things we can do to challenge those negative beliefs and build a stronger, more resilient sense of self.
Okay, so we've kind of established what self-esteem is,
Mm-hmm.
or at least what it isn't.
Right.
And we've seen how low self-esteem can show up in our thoughts, our behaviors, and even our mental health.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really eager to get to the good stuff,
Okay.
like those strategies for improvement that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
You sent in a ton of great resources.
I did.
So let's dive into those.
Let's do it.
All right.
So to make things a little bit easier to digest,
Okay.
I thought we could break this down into a few key areas. Okay.
Starting with what are called cognitive techniques. So these are strategies that really focus on changing our thought patterns,
Okay.
and they can be surprisingly powerful.
Awesome. Let's hear them. I'm ready to start rewiring my brain for better self-esteem.
All right. So one technique that really stood out to me comes from the WikiHow article.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the negative thought detective.
Okay.
And it's all about putting those negative thoughts,
Yeah.
the ones that tell you you're not good enough, not smart enough, or whatever your particular flavor of self-doubt is.
Yeah.
It's about putting those thoughts on trial.
So it's like challenging those thoughts
Yeah.
instead of just accepting them as the truth.
Exactly. So it's about asking yourself, is this thought actually true? What evidence do I have to support it? And what's a more balanced and realistic way to look at this situation?
I love that. It's like you're taking back control of your thoughts instead of just letting them run wild.
Exactly. And sometimes just the act of questioning those negative thoughts.
Can be enough to weaken their grip on us a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's a good first step. Another really simple but effective technique recommended by the NHS is positive self-talk.
Okay.
So they actually suggest making a list of 5 good things about yourself, your strengths, talents, positive qualities, and then reminding yourself of those things regularly.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in all that self-criticism, right?
Oh, yeah.
So consciously shifting our focus to the positive
Mm-hmm.
can really be a game changer.
Yeah, it really can. It's like we're building a muscle
Mm,
for self-appreciation.
yeah. Okay, so we've got some tools for tackling negative thoughts.
Right.
And boosting positive ones.
Yes.
What else can we do to start shifting our self-esteem in a more positive direction?
All right, so beyond these cognitive techniques, there are also a lot of practical behavioral things we can do.
Okay.
Both the NHS and the Better Up article talk about the importance of setting realistic challenges.
What do they mean by that?
Okay, so it's about pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones, but in a way that feels manageable, right?
Okay.
Not overwhelming.
Okay.
So it could be something like joining a class that you've always wanted to try, going to a social event, even if you're feeling a little bit nervous, or even just striking up a conversation with someone new.
I can see how those things would build confidence.
Yeah.
Each time you push yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought.
Exactly. And, speaking of pushing boundaries,
Mhm.
another really important behavioral shift is assertiveness.
Okay.
So the Mind and the WikiHow articles both talk about the importance of learning to say no.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Setting boundaries to protect our time and energy and well-being.
Yeah, and I think this is especially hard for people who tend to be people pleasers, always putting others' needs before their own.
Oh, absolutely. But learning to set healthy boundaries is essential for self-respect, right?
Yeah,
It's about recognizing that our needs are just as important as anyone else's.
totally. Okay, so we've got cognitive techniques, behavioral shifts.
hmm
What else have you uncovered in your research?
Okay, so you might be surprised to learn how much our physical well-being influences our self-esteem.
Really? I hadn't thought about that connection before.
Yeah. So both the Better Up and the Mind articles emphasize the link between things like exercise, diet, and our mental health.
Okay.
So exercise isn't just about physical fitness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also releases endorphins that can boost our mood and our energy levels. And a healthy diet can improve our focus and overall well-being.
So it's like this ripple effect. When we take care of our physical health,
Yeah.
it has this positive impact on our mental and emotional state,
Yeah,
which can then boost our self-esteem. It
exactly.
all kind of works together.
And let's not forget self-care, even in its simplest forms.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about self-care?
Yes. So taking time for activities that nourish us, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's a relaxing bath, listening to music, spending time in nature, or whatever brings you joy, that can have a really powerful impact on our mindset.
I love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes those small acts of self-care can feel like
Yeah,
a radical act of self-love.
absolutely. And speaking of self-love,
Yeah.
we need to talk about therapy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We know that not everyone has access to therapy, right?
Right.
But it's important to acknowledge that it can be a really valuable tool for anyone struggling with low self-esteem.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
Yeah.
What kind of therapy are we talking about here?
So both the psychology tools and the WikiHow articles give a quick overview of two common approaches:
Okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT,
Okay.
and psychodynamic therapy.
Okay, so CBT and psychodynamic therapy.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So CBT focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns,
Okay.
whereas psychodynamic therapy delves a bit deeper
Yeah.
into past experiences and how they might be shaping our present-day struggles.
So CBT is more about changing the way we think in the here and now.
Right.
And psychodynamic therapy is more about understanding the roots of our current challenges.
That's a good way to put it. And of course, there are many other types of therapy as well.
Right.
The important thing is to find an approach that resonates with you and a therapist who you feel comfortable working with.
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize that seeking professional help
Yeah,
is a sign of strength, not weakness.
totally.
It takes a lot of courage to acknowledge that we need support
Yes,
and to reach out for it.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, you don't have to navigate this journey alone.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to therapy, there are tons of resources available, both online and in your community.
Yeah, support groups, online forums, even just talking to a trusted friend or family member.
Yeah, that's huge.
All of those things can make a really big difference.
Absolutely. And speaking of support,
Okay.
there's one more point from the Better Up article that I want to highlight.
Okay.
It's about the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive people. And, being willing to let go of relationships that drain our energy or bring us down.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're constantly surrounded by negativity, it's got to be that much harder to cultivate a positive self-image.
It really does. And sometimes, that might mean making some tough decisions
Mm.
about who we allow into our inner circle.
Yeah, I think this is so important. It's
Yeah.
like that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
You really want to be mindful
Yeah,
of the company you keep
for sure.
and make sure it's supporting your growth,
hmm
not hindering it.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
We've gone from defining self-esteem to understanding its impact,
Mm-hmm.
and even started to explore some initial strategies for improvement.
Yeah. My brain is definitely full,
Good.
but in a good way.
In a good way.
Like, I feel like we've already uncovered some really valuable insights and the practical tips.
Yeah. And, we'll be back soon to delve even deeper into those strategies,
Mhm.
including some fascinating insights from real people who've been on this journey themselves.
I can't wait. I'm always amazed by the wisdom and resilience of everyday people.
Yeah.
They often have the most relatable and inspiring advice.
I agree. Until next time, keep exploring these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
experimenting with what resonates with you, and
Yeah.
remember, you are worthy of investing in your own well-being.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon with part 2 of this deep dive on self-esteem. All right, so last time we really dug into what self-esteem is,
Yeah.
and more importantly, what it isn't.
Right?
And we talked about how low self-esteem can impact us in ways that we might not even realize.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm excited to get back to those practical strategies for
Okay.
actually building a more positive self-image.
Yes. Let's do it.
One of the things that struck me as we were preparing for this deep dives
Mm-hmm.
is how much emphasis all of your sources put on taking action. It's not just about thinking positive thoughts. It's about actually doing things differently.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's dive into some of those action-oriented strategies.
Right.
Remember those realistic challenges that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Both the NHS and the Better Up article really emphasize the importance of pushing ourselves a little bit
Yeah.
outside of our comfort zones.
Right. Just outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah, and they gave some really concrete examples like joining a class, attending a social event,
Yeah.
or even just striking up a conversation with someone new.
Yeah.
But honestly, even those things can feel really daunting when you're struggling with low self-esteem.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's why it's so important to start small.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about suddenly becoming a social butterfly or signing up for a marathon.
Right.
It's really about taking baby steps, little by little, to build that confidence.
So maybe instead of going to a huge party,
Yeah.
you start by having coffee with one friend.
Exactly.
Or instead of joining a gym, you just go for a walk in the park.
Exactly. It's about finding those small wins, those little moments of, hey, I did that,
Yeah.
that start to kind of chip away at the self-doubt.
I love that. It's like you're retraining your brain to see yourself as capable
Yeah.
and courageous.
Exactly. Exactly.
Another area where I think action is really key is in self-care.
Yeah.
And I know that term gets thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah, it does. It's
Yeah.
more than just bubble baths and face masks.
Okay, so how do your sources define self-care
Yeah.
in the context of self-esteem?
Well, the Mind article really emphasizes this connection between our physical well-being
Mm-hmm.
and our mental well-being.
Okay.
And they talk about how things like getting enough sleep, eating a balanced diet, and exercising regularly
Yeah.
can have a profound impact on how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, we all know that those things are important for our physical health,
Right.
but I hadn't really considered the connection to self-esteem.
It's not always obvious, is it?
No.
But it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
When you're sleep deprived and eating junk food all the time,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty hard to feel good about yourself, both physically and mentally.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like you're sending your body the message that you don't really care about it.
Yeah.
So how can you expect to have high self-esteem if you're not even taking care of your basic needs?
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So those basic self-care practices like getting enough sleep, nourishing your body,
Mm-hmm.
moving your body in ways that feel good,
Yeah.
those are like the foundation
Yeah.
for building a stronger sense of self-worth.
Like laying the groundwork, right?
Yeah.
For more positive self-image.
Exactly.
And then from there, you can start to build on that foundation with all these other strategies.
Right. So on top of those foundational practices, there are also those smaller, more everyday acts of self-care that can make a big difference.
Okay, like what kinds of things?
So things like taking a few minutes to meditate or do some deep breathing exercises, listening to your favorite music,
Yeah.
spending time in nature, reading a good book,
Yeah.
whatever helps you to de-stress and reconnect with yourself.
I love all of those ideas.
Yeah,
They're so simple, but so powerful.
they are.
It's like taking those little pauses throughout the day to say to yourself, hey, I'm worth taking care of.
I love that. And sometimes those small acts of self-care can feel almost rebellious,
Yeah.
especially if you're used to putting everyone else's needs before your own.
Yeah, it's like you're reclaiming your right
Yeah.
to prioritize your own well-being.
Total.
And that in itself can be a huge boost to your self-esteem.
It really can.
Speaking of perspective shifts,
Yes.
one of the things that I found really fascinating in the research that you sent
Okay.
was this idea of challenging how we view ourselves
Yeah.
and the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those Reddit insights that we were talking about?
Yeah, those are great.
Femitrail's concept of toxic shame really stuck with me.
Yeah, that was a powerful one. Can you remind me what that was all about?
Yeah, so basically Femitrail was talking about how a lot of us carry around this really deep-seated sense of shame.
Yeah.
This feeling that we are fundamentally flawed
Mm-hmm.
or unworthy.
Right.
And they called it toxic shame
Mm-hmm.
because it's not based in reality.
Yeah.
It's like this poison that we've absorbed
Right.
from our culture, our families,
Yeah.
maybe even our own negative self-talk.
Totally. It's like we've internalized all these messages about not being good enough.
Yeah.
And we started to believe them.
Yeah.
So Femitrell's point was that once we recognize that this shame is toxic,
Yeah.
that it's not actually true,
Yeah.
we can start to detach from it.
Okay.
We can stop taking it so personally and start to see it for what it is, a harmful illusion.
That is such a liberating thought.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like this shame might be there. Yeah. But it doesn't define me. It's not who I am at my core. It doesn't have to. And on a similar note, another Reddit user, the Lonely Wolfkin, offered some really practical advice about taking small steps towards your ideal self.
I like that. It feels so much more manageable
Yeah.
than trying to overhaul your entire life overnight.
Right, exactly. And it shifts the focus from perfection to progress.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging where you are now, envisioning where you want to be, and then taking those small, consistent steps to bridge the gap.
Yeah, so maybe your ideal self is more confident, more assertive, more comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
And so instead of trying to become that person overnight, you start by identifying one small action you can take each day to kind of move you in that direction.
Exactly. And then you celebrate those small wins, those little moments of growth, because they're all evidence that you're moving in the right direction.
I love that.
Yeah.
So even if you don't reach your ideal self overnight, you're still making progress.
You are.
And that progress in itself could be a huge boost to your self-esteem.
Absolutely. And speaking of progress, one of the most important things to remember on this journey is that building self-esteem is a process, not a destination.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's really easy to fall into this trap of thinking, once I achieve X, then I'll finally feel good about myself. Or once I reach a certain level of success, then I'll be worthy.
Right.
But that's just setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah, because there's always going to be another goal to chase, another milestone to reach.
Exactly. And it's like we're constantly postponing our own happiness and self-acceptance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So how do we break free from that cycle?
Yeah, how ideal we break free from that cycle.
Well, I think it comes back to a lot of those ideas we were talking about earlier. Self-compassion.
Yeah.
Focusing on progress over perfection. Celebrating those small wins. It's about recognizing that we are worthy right now, just as we are, even if we haven't achieved all of our goals or reached our full potential.
That's such an important reminder.
It is.
It's so easy to get caught up in that not enough mentality.
Totally.
Always striving for something more.
Yeah, and one of the things that really helps me to stay grounded in that sense of self-worth is this idea of focusing on my values.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Okay.
How do values play into self-esteem?
Well, when you are clear about your values, the things that are truly important to you, it gives you this internal compass to guide your decisions and your actions. And when you're living in alignment with your values, it's much easier to feel good about yourself.
Even when things are tough.
Okay, so for example, if one of your core values is kindness, you might make a conscious effort to be kind to yourself. Even when you make mistakes.
Exactly. And if another value is growth, you might challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone, knowing that you're honoring that value even if things don't go perfectly. Right.
I love that. It's like your values become this anchor that keeps you grounded in self-respect, even when those waves of self-doubt are kind of crashing all around you.
That's a really good way to put it. And, speaking of waves, let's talk about those moments when self-doubt does inevitably creep in.
Oh, yeah, those are the tough ones. What do we do when those negative thoughts start to take over?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that those thoughts are normal.
Okay.
Everyone experiences self-doubt, even the most confident people you know.
That's comforting.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm not a freak for having these thoughts. It's just part of the human experience.
Exactly. And I think one of the most powerful things we can do in those moments is to simply acknowledge those thoughts without judgment.
Okay.
It's like, okay, I'm feeling insecure right now. That's okay. It doesn't mean I'm a failure or that I'm not good enough.
It's like you're giving yourself permission to feel those feelings. Without letting them define you.
Exactly. And once we've acknowledged those thoughts, Then we can start to challenge them using those cognitive techniques we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Asking ourselves, is this thought really true?
Mm-hmm.
What evidence do I have to support it?
Yeah.
What's a more balanced, realistic perspective?
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like you become your own thought detective,
Yes.
investigating those negative beliefs and seeing if they actually hold up under scrutiny.
Exactly. And sometimes, just the act of questioning those thoughts can be enough to kind of diffuse their power.
Okay, so we've got some strategies for dealing with those moments of self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do to kind of cultivate
Yeah.
a more positive self-image in
Okay.
the long term?
Well, this might sound a bit woo-woo,
Okay.
but one thing that's helped me a lot is practicing gratitude.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
How does gratitude boost self-esteem?
Well, when you're focusing on the things that you're grateful for,
Yeah.
it shifts your attention away from what you're lacking
Mm-hmm.
and towards what you already have.
Okay.
And that can be a really powerful way to cultivate a sense of abundance,
Yeah.
self-worth.
Yeah, so it's like you're training your brain to see the good
Exactly.
in yourself and in your life
Yeah.
instead of dwelling on the negative.
And even small things can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Like taking a moment each day to appreciate your health, your loved ones, a beautiful sunset. Those little moments of gratitude can really add up over time.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's like you're creating this gratitude muscle that gets stronger with each use.
Totally.
And who doesn't want to feel
Well,
more grateful and appreciative of life?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So one last thing I want to touch on before we move on
Okay.
is the role of self-expression.
Okay. How does that tie into self-esteem?
Well, I think when we allow ourselves to express our authentic selves, whether it's through art, music, writing, dance, whatever lights you up,
Yeah.
it can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah, it's like you're giving yourself permission to be fully seen
Yeah,
and heard without apology.
exactly. And when we do that,
Yeah.
it can help us to connect more deeply with ourselves and to embrace our uniqueness.
Yeah, I love that. It's like instead of trying to fit into some mold,
Right. Yeah.
you're celebrating what makes you different, what makes you special.
Totally.
And that in itself can be a huge boost to our self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this section.
We have setting realistic challenges, taking care of ourselves physically and emotionally, challenging those negative thoughts, practicing gratitude, expressing ourselves authentically. We've assembled this whole toolkit
We have.
for boosting self-esteem.
Exactly.
And what's so great about all of these strategies
Yeah.
is that they're accessible to everyone.
They are.
You don't need any special skills or resources
Right.
to start putting them into practice today.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important, right? This
Yeah.
isn't just some esoteric concept reserved for people with, money and privilege.
Right.
Self-esteem is something that everyone can cultivate,
Absolutely.
regardless of their background or their circumstances.
I think that's a really important point
Yeah.
and a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah. My brain is definitely full.
Good. In a good way, though.
In a good way.
Yeah. And when we come back, we'll delve into another really important aspect of this whole conversation.
Oh, the role of relationships in building self-esteem.
Ooh, that's a topic that I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
Because I can definitely see how the people we surround ourselves with can either boost or damage our self-worth.
I agree. So we'll dive into that next time, exploring how to cultivate healthy relationships that support our self-esteem.
Can't wait. I'm already starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. The thoughts, the actions, the relationships, it's all interconnected.
It is. And it's by understanding those connections that we can start to create lasting positive change.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep experimenting with these strategies, keep being kind to yourselves, and remember, you are worthy of love and respect just as you are. All right, so welcome back. We've been really deep diving into self-esteem.
Yeah.
Exploring everything from how it's formed to practical strategies for boosting it.
Mm-hmm.
And in this final part, I'm really excited to shift our focus to something that I think is super crucial when we're talking about self-esteem.
Okay.
And that is the role of relationships. You sent in some sources that really highlight how the people that we surround ourselves with can have such a profound impact on how we see ourselves.
They really can. And one of the things that really stood out to me in your research was this idea of mirroring
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this, yeah.
It's this psychological phenomenon where we tend to internalize the way that other people see us.
Yeah.
So if we're constantly surrounded by people who are criticizing us or putting us down, it's really no surprise if we start to see ourselves that way too.
Right. It's like we're looking into this distorted mirror
Yeah.
that's reflecting back all those negative messages. And over time, we start to believe that that distorted image is the truth.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, when we're surrounded by people who love and support us, who see our strengths and encourage our growth, it can have such a transformative impact on our self-esteem.
Yeah, it's like we're finally seeing ourselves through this clear, loving lens that reflects back our true worth.
Exactly. You know, one of your sources, the Better Up article, really hits the nail on the head when they talk about the importance of creating what they call a support system.
Okay.
A network of people who lift you up, believe in you, and encourage you to be your best self.
And they also talked about the importance of letting go of relationships.
Yes, so important.
That drain our energy or bring us down.
Right, and that can be tough.
Oh, it is so tough.
Especially when those relationships are with people that we care about.
Yeah.
But sometimes setting boundaries or even distancing ourselves from those relationships is the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves.
Totally. It's like we're creating space for those healthy, supportive relationships to flourish.
Absolutely. Now, you also included some really insightful personal stories from Reddit.
I did, yeah.
That speak to the power of connection. Remember the Lonely Wolfkins post?
Yes.
They talked about how finding a community of like-minded people online helped them to feel less alone and more confident in themselves.
Yeah, and even if those connections are virtual, they can still have such a profound impact.
They really can.
On our sense of belonging and self-worth.
I think that's such a great point.
Yeah.
Because it really highlights the fact that connection can take many forms.
Right.
It doesn't have to be just family or close friends.
Right.
It could be through a hobby group, a volunteer organization, an online community, any space where you feel seen and heard and valued for who you are.
Yeah, and I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where so many people are feeling isolated and disconnected. Finding those spaces where you can truly be yourself without judgment can be so healing.
It really can. And, you know, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to one of the most powerful concepts we've explored, self-compassion.
Yes.
You know, you included several sources that emphasize the importance of treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend.
Yeah, and you know, Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion really resonated with me.
Yeah.
It's like she's giving us permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to not have it all figured out.
Exactly. And, you know, when we embrace self-compassion, it can have this ripple effect on all areas of our lives, including our relationships.
How so?
Well, when we are kinder to ourselves, we're less likely to be critical and judgmental of other people. We're more patient, more understanding, more forgiving.
Yeah.
And that creates a much more positive and supportive environment for everyone around us.
It's like we're breaking the cycle of negativity.
Yeah.
And replacing it with a cycle of kindness and compassion.
Exactly. And, you know, that's not always easy.
No, it's not.
We all have those moments when we slip back into old patterns of self-criticism or judgment.
Yeah, for sure.
But the key is to keep practicing. Keep coming back to that intention of treating ourselves with love and understanding.
Yeah. It's like we're building a new muscle.
Yeah.
Self-compassion muscle.
Totally.
And it gets stronger with each use.
Absolutely. So as we come to the end of our deep dive into self-esteem, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
It comes from one of your personal reflections.
Okay.
And I think it really beautifully captures the essence of this journey.
Right, I'm ready.
It said, self-esteem is not a destination, it's a direction.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds us that this is an ongoing process, a lifelong journey of learning to love and accept ourselves more fully each day.
It is. And, you know, it's not always easy. There will be ups and downs, moments of doubt, moments of triumph. But the important thing is to just keep moving forward. Yeah. Keep taking those small steps. Keep choosing self-compassion over self-criticism.
Such a good reminder. And to remember that we are worthy, just as we are imperfections and all.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into self-esteem.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and some practical tools to support you on your journey.
Yes.
And remember, even the smallest act of self-kindness can make a world of difference.
It really can.
So be gentle with yourselves, celebrate your strengths, and never stop believing in your own potential.
Yes.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Bye, everyone.